Hello and welcome, past and present snobs. This is my review of episode 2 of Brave New World. Before we get started, I just want to mention that I haven't mentioned much about the actors. I wanted to mention a couple of key ones that I just didn't really even think about it. But, of course, John is being played by Alden Ehrenreich of Han Solo, the new Han Solo fame. He's pretty obvious seeing that one. One that I didn't actually notice until I was looking at the credits and said, whoa, who does she play? John's mother, Linda, is played by Demi Moore. She looks very different with her blonde hair. And another notable is the guy who played Viserys Targaryen in the season 1 of Game of Thrones. He got gold poured on his head. Harry Lloyd, he plays Bernard. Just a little bit about the acting. I find the acting to be good. I'm not blown away by any of the performances. Not like with I am with some of the performances in Raised by Wolves, but it's very solid. The woman who plays Lenina, I didn't look up her name. She's doing a good job. I got no complaints with any of it. Like I said, not that it's amazing, but it's good. It's adequate. It doesn't take away from the story. It adds to the story. So let's get into the episode. So the episode starts off with a shot of the world coordinator and talking to Bernard's boss. So she comes across. She's kind of arrogant. We don't know that she's the world coordinator yet. We find out later. But she comes across a little bit arrogant, and she's using Indra, and she's reviewing footage of the fall, the Epsilon who quote fell, and looking at it from different people's view. So from that we get a couple things. That number one, anyone can look at any other. Well, not anyone, but she can definitely look at through anyone else's eyes and see what's going on, what they see. That footage is also being stored somewhere, and it also shows us the power of Indra, which is the world. We don't know exactly what it is. I'm assuming it's some sort of world program or AI that allows everyone to be connected all the time. But the interesting part about that is after she finishes and says, I need to talk to this Epsilon, the Bernard's boss says, he has this sort of mystical feeling, seems to have a mystical feeling about Indra. And, this guy is pretty high up, right? Like, he's higher than Bernard. He's close enough to be talking to the world coordinator. And she says, I see this guy. He's like, I've never seen it done. What? Oh, Indra being used. So even though, the very high elements of the society are still not aware of the things that, everything that goes on, there are things that are kept from them. So I thought that was quite interesting. We go to the next scene, and it's Lenina and her friend Franny, and they're watching children being, quote, trained, which basically consists of them getting shock therapy. They do something that they don't want them to do. They give them a shock with a cattle prod, and then they immediately give them soma to make them feel better. So they make them feel bad, then they immediately make them feel good. So you could see that it's very much conditioning training, which fits in with the original of the book. Franny seems to take delight in watching them. She seems to like seeing kids shocked, which is a little bit disturbing. A couple of quotes that they have when they're watching this is that Franny says, everyone in their place. Note that when they're watching the training, all of the children are being trained together. There are epsilons and there are alphas and betas all together. So she says, everyone in their place, and Lenina says, everybody happy now. And then Franny comes back and says, you're saying it like it's a bad thing. So already we're starting to see Franny is disenchanted with society. And that's going to be even, at the end of this episode, she's going to go through a bit of a change from sorry, not at the end of this episode, but I'm sure further episodes she's going to see something that is going to disturb her a lot more. So then they go to Franny is going on. She's going with Bernard to the Savage Lands. So she gets a call. She has to leave. She takes off. Franny's walking with her and makes the comment about Bernard not a real Alpha Plus. She says something like, you should. Franny says something like, you should go with an Alpha Plus. When I go to the Savage Lands, I'm going to go with an Alpha Plus. And she's like, well, Bernard is an Alpha Plus. She's like, well, not a real one. So you already know that everyone seems to know that Bernard is not. He's a bit abnormal. He's not like everyone else. He's a little bit different, and he's not a real Alpha Plus. Maybe So already, people know that. We go to the next scene, and Bernard is waiting for Lenina. He looks over the balcony, and he has a flashback of the falling, similar to the one when he touched the Epsilon who fell. So that's a bit interesting where those are coming from. What will be happening with these flashbacks? We'll have to wait and see. The next thing is that Lenina comes up. They talk, and he says, "Let me get the bags for you." And she's like, "Oh, sure." And she holds out the bags, and then he sort of waits there, and then another, I think a Delta. I don't think it's an Epsilon, but a Delta comes over and takes the bags while he's sort of just standing there waiting. So you see a little bit more of the class society and the supposedly enlightened, but there's he won't even pick up the bags for her. He's got to get someone else to do that. From there we go to the next scene. Is they're in one of the flying cars, and they're going to the rocket port where they're going to take the rocket to go to the Savage Lands. This is a bit of an interesting scene. They go by they see the reclamation center as they're going by, and it's very pretty. It's got colors and stuff, and he's kind of tries to make himself look smart by saying something about this and that science makes the reflections, and Lenina is actually is smarter than he is, and she says, no, it's actually this. These are the reasons for the colors changing like that, which is kind of, in our society, it's kind of, there's the saying that, men don't like smart women, so women sometimes tend to, and this is a patriarchal, this might be back in the 60s and whatever, but women try to hide their intelligence somewhat to the man. That's an old sort of way of looking at things. So she does that. She doesn't do that. She comes out and shows us, no, I'm a beta, but I know more about this than you. And Bernard sort of gives her a little bit of a side eye and kind of a smile. So I get the impression that he is not intimidated by this woman who may actually be smarter than him, even though he's an alpha and she's only a beta. So that was my impression. So curious to see if anyone else got that impression as well. Of course, Lenina is also she's a little bit nervous as they get close to the rocket. She goes to take Soma, and he basically tells her, "You want to feel this. Don't take it. You want to feel this experience." The next scene, they're aboard the rocket, and they're going to their seats, and there's a kid who's an alpha. He looks like he's 12, 14, whatever. He's growing up, learning to be an alpha, going to take his place in society soon. And he gives this look of disdain when Lenina goes by him. So she asks Bernard about, why are these kids going there? And Bernard says, all alphas visit the Savage Lands, before they become adults. And of course they ask why. And he says, quote, ask if you're going to ask someone to care for the health of society, show them a dead one first. So it becomes obvious there that the alphas consider themselves the caretakers of society, and it's their job. Everyone else lives in society, but it's their job to keep the health of it. So they are the upper class. They are the leaders of the society, and they see themselves that way. It also shows that, a little bit of their arrogance their society is perfect and good, and of course the savage lands, which is kind of like more of like our society now, is dead and gone. So as the rocket goes so high up into the atmosphere, there's actually a point in time where it is they experience 0 G for a short amount of time. So from that, one of the children who's going on the trip sort of floats up and is floating around, and then we look and we see that, and we also see Lenina doing the same sort of thing. So none of the adults, it's only a child and Lenina, and this kind of shows her childlike fascination with what's going on, a bit of her personality. She's floating around, and she, of course, Bernard, come try this, and he's like, maybe on the way back. He's much more risk at first. He's like, quick, get down. We're going to be going down soon. You see the difference in their personalities. Her childlike fascination and her willingness to take risks versus Bernard and his caution. The next scene takes us to the Savage Land, where John and Linda are watching a Savage Land commercial. John and then Linda have a discussion. Linda mentions that Madison, the girl that he likes, will get him into that baby trap. And also, what about her? What's going to happen to her? John replies with, we'll die here. Let's leave. And Linda doesn't want to leave. Where's she going to go? It's like she's waiting for someone. And just as a mention from the book, the boss of Bernard in the book is the person who is John's father. So I can't remember the circumstances, but Lenina gets pregnant, somehow at the Savage Lands are there and gets left behind, and then she has John, and she's waiting for him, and he never comes back to get her. So that's from the book. I'm not sure if that's the same in this situation here. We'll have to wait and see. So from there we go to the next scene. They arrive at the hotel. That is Bernard and Lenina. They're at the hotel. She's looking at various creatures in glass, and then she looks at a deer beast. So it's just a normal deer. This kind of demonstrates their society's lack of knowledge, at least at their level, about what these things are. She says, "Oh, look at this horrible beast. I mean, it's a deer. I've got tons of them around my house." She's like, "Oh, this ferocious beast roaming the countryside. How horrible!" And like, it's just a deer, right? So she mentions about how it's scary, but Bernard actually says it's kind of sad that it's extinct, and they both have this look in their eye, and you can see that they're getting a little bit excited by this idea that they're in a savage land and there's wild beasts running around, even though these are extinct. They're kind of falling into, even for such a utopian equal society, they're kind of falling in this sex roles where, oh, look at this scary creature, and he's like, oh, it's kind of sad, I would defend you from that creature, sort of thing. So that's kind of interesting. They then speak to the clerk, who's talking about the various houses of that they can go to visit, the House of Want, House of Monogamy, etc. So one of the things that he mentions is he doesn't recommend they go to the House of Monogamy, and Bernard's like, well, why is that? And he goes, well, it can be upsetting to certain sensitive persons, and he gives a side glance at Lenina, as if she's just a beta, and she wouldn't be able to handle the idea of monogamy. So that's kind of interesting. From there, they go into the room, and after they figure out how to get in, Bernard is a little bit upset. It's not how he remembered. He goes through, and it's not how he remembers from his childhood when he was 14 or 15, when he was going on his visit, and he, Lenina asks what's wrong, which is kind of unusual because normally they're like, oh, I feel bad, take a soma, but she shows compassion towards him and actually wants to know what's wrong. He mentions that, it's not like I remember we came here and we kind of forgot who we were, and we were for once happy. So it kind of implies that the losing of responsibilities, and perhaps he's not really happy other times. If this is, he remembers himself happy at this time, and it was, 15, 20 years ago. So then there's some, they look around, they look out, they're right across from what is the orgy pool. I can't remember what it's called. It's the pool where they have all their orgies. They look out there, and they're a little bit disappointed, but then they begin talking, and they talk about monogamy and that sort of thing, and they get turned on. Both of them are turned on by it. Lenina more so, it seems, than anybody, but they're turned on by it, and they start to address each other and that sort of thing. But then Lenina, as they're partway in the act of taking off each other's clothes, they mention something about monogamy, and we should wait for, quote, maybe we should pretend and let's wait for our wedding night. So they get this, they're both getting this thrill from being and acting savage, which is probably not something that that would be very that their counselors would be okay with. This is kind of it's a little bit of a dirty thing that they're doing, from what anyone can tell from the society. So that's kind of interesting. From there we go back to New London, where the world coordinator, and this is when we find out, confirm that she is the world coordinator. She is interviewing a bunch of Epsilon. She has a ton of them in this open area, and she asks, which Epsilon was here, and nobody answers. There's, at least 1,000 of them, perhaps more, and there's a discussion between her and Bernard's boss, and he says, what? None of them is coming forward. Epsilons aren't capable of deception. But then, as they're all standing there, the world coordinator looks down and comes some of the rows, and she sees one of the Epsilons, his hand twitching, and says, all right, let them all go, and goes up to this one. Do not, don't leave. I want to talk to you. So it's interesting when the speech she gives to all the Epsilons, she talks about a virus, and Bernard's boss, he doesn't know what that is, a virus. What's that? And she's like, oh, it's an ancient word. So then she has a little bit of a discussion with this Epsilon, and he says, I was changed when I touched him, and did anyone else touch him? And he says, the Soma Man, which of course is Bernard. So from there, the next scene is back on this ancient school bus that Lenina and Bernard are taking on their trip in the Savage Lands, and they have a guide on there. I guess she's a Gamma, and she's talking about history. She goes, it talks about, so we get a little information here, talking about the history, 200 years ago when the Savages rejected the world government. And it's kind of interesting because, she doesn't actually know. It seems more like a rumor. We think it was about 200 years ago when the Savages rejected world government, that sort of thing. So she doesn't actually tell and say, for sure that this is what happened. From there, we go to John and Madison. He's helping her get ready, getting her fake pregnant costume on. And she says stuff like, make sure it gets done. John wants to talk. And she says, after the show. From there, the same guy from the first episode comes in, the guy who berated John in front of everybody and was nasty to him, comes in, makes some speech to him about how he's an artist, and he gets upset and he's sorry, he apologizes, but then instantly threatens him again, saying that Madison is his girl, and if he goes near her, he'll kill him. So, not a nice guy. From there, we go back to the bus again. They are going by and they see a family unit, and the guide is, quick to point this out. Oh, we barely see them together like this. It's like a bunch of, she talks like they're, a bunch of animals, and we've seen, a group of lions, and they're all there. Oh my goodness, make sure you see that. So it appears that the same kid who was rude to, who gave Lenina a look on the rocket, you know, demands that she moves out of her seat so that he can go and see the family unit better. So he goes, Beta, get out of there. And she gets up, and even though the kid is like, I don't know, 15 or 14, and Lenina is obviously 30 or close to it, he's obviously a kid, she's obviously an adult. She gets up to move, but Bernard stops it, and he, tells the kid, basically not to be a jerk. He takes the kid's badge, and the kid gets so upset when his badge is gone, as if without that badge he doesn't exist. He's not that person anymore. The kid gets so upset that Bernard has to give him Soma, and also to a bunch of others who have witnessed this, and give him his badge back as well. This kind of shows a little bit of the emotional weakness that these people have, their society have, and how tied they are to their status. From there, we go to see the House of Want, which is basically looks like a Walmart type show. They call it the Day of Black. It's obviously a Black Friday example, and it's like the worst, example of Black Friday you've ever seen, where they open the doors, the people run in, they're grabbing boxes, people are being trampled, punched, kicked, and beaten on. I mean, these things do happen occasionally, but they're fairly, in our society, they're fairly rare. Like, it's not normal for people to be beat up, trampled, that sort of thing, though some of them can get a little crazy. So it kind of makes me question, this is the worst example, and it's exaggerated, beyond normality. Why does New London have to assure its citizens that everything was way worse than it is now before? Why do they need this propaganda to prop them up? So from there we go to the House of Monogamy, and we see Lenina. John sees Lenina acting innocent. She's like, goes up, she sees this dead bird beside the stage. She's like, is this part of it? She's walking on the grass in her bare feet. She's got a little bit of that childlike wonder as she's going around. From there, Warden Cortez, another Alpha Plus, comes up to Bernard and says stuff like, "Oh, I didn't expect to see you until tomorrow." And he's like, "Well, what? Why do you even expected to see me?" Cortez makes this, good to see you. He's all happy to see him. Bernard's a little confused. Oh, didn't the director tell you about this? And he's like, well, tell me what? And Cortez makes a comment about how, I was sent here for a 1-year tour, and that was 7 years ago. And, I will show you around. Didn't he tell you? It's obvious that Bernard is being dumped here. Bernard was sent here thinking for a vacation, but it appears like he's not coming back. He's being gotten rid of somehow, or being sent away. So, it's not set for sure. He's a little confused. Then we go to the next part where, the next scene where they're doing the wedding. So the wedding is quite interesting. They seem to emphasize ever and ever the officiant, the minister, whoever it is, he says, "Do you take this man and this woman, to be ever and ever, to be monogamous ever and ever and ever again?" So they really focus on the ever and ever and the monogamy. The bride is obviously pregnant. It's kind of funny. And then they push the jealousy angle. There's some discussion between Bernard and Lenina, and she's like, well, why are they giving it away? Why do the bridesmaids look, so upset? And he's like, oh, they're giving away? Well, doesn't their father want her anymore? And he's like, oh, I guess not. And the bridesmaids look upset because they're next. They're the next ones to be gotten rid of. So, they have a very strange idea of what monogamy and weddings were for. So of course the bad guy the town horrible person, who's the guy who's been bothering John, he steps out and he's like, no, I love her instead. I want her. That the child in her is mine. That sort of thing. And from there, everyone, everyone in the wedding party and everyone watching the wedding pulls out guns and they're all pointing them at each other. Like, this is the worst. This is the worst wedding I've ever been to, and I've been to some interesting ones. One thing I wanted to point out is when this guy's making the speech, you can see Warden Cortez in a part of the screen. You watch him, and he's mouthing every word that he says. It's obvious that he's had a hand in writing it, or he's memorized it or something. So they're really, there's been a lot of work put into this. So from there, they're supposed to shoot each other, and the rounds aren't supposed to be live. But as was implied from episode 1, implied that the rounds were going to be changed, and sure enough, somebody fires and blows a guy's head off. From there, people start. Well, that's not true. So, interesting thing is that from there, Madison pulls out a gun and she shoots the guy who's been bothering John. She, for him to come and say, "Oh, get away from my girl." Well, she obviously doesn't like him. She knows the rounds are live. She's in on this whole thing, and she blasts him and shoots him. From there, a bunch of vehicles come up, and a bunch of people jump out, and they all start shooting everybody, the actors and the New Londoners watching. So, interesting from there is that these people are, they're stunned. Warden Cortez is saying, "Hey, that's not their lines. What's going on?" He doesn't seem to understand. And Bernard is just sitting there shocked. It's Lenina that has to grab him and say, "Come on," he's stunned. She grabs him and pulls him away. So, interesting, these people don't, they are not, generally New Londoners are, they're individuals. They're not, they don't look after each other. They are like individuals in a sea. Everyone belongs to everybody. There's no ties to anyone. But she obviously feels a tie to him. She grabs him and helps him escape. And even though he's shot and wounded, she stays with him. So that's kind of, in my view, this seems like kind of unusual behavior for the people of New London who, don't care if you live or die. It's like no big deal, as we'll see later on, I'm sure. So from there, we go, there's them running, trying to hide. Not much to say about that. The last scene of the episode is Lenina and Bernard. They're hiding out in a hotel, running, hiding. They lock the door. She's trying to handle what's going on and help him, but she still is required. She still requires to give herself some soma to keep herself operating, and giving Bernard some to help him get going. So finally, cars drive up. There's a bit of tension. They think that they're about to be found, but instead, John runs in with a big knife, and she's scared and screaming. But he covers her mouth and says, "Be quiet," and the episode ends there. So, which obviously implies that he's going to try to help them escape. So that's the episode. That's the summary of episode 2. So if you have any interesting thoughts about the episode, feel free to put them into the comments. I'm curious to curious to see what other people think of that episode. And there's a couple of things that I thought were interesting within it, which might not be most obvious to people, or people might have a different interpretation. So if you feel so inclined, be happy to read your comments and discuss it in the comments. And if not, like and subscribe, and we'll see you for episode 3.